Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum, dear students. Our current session is about language shift, and I hope and expect by the end of this session you would have an understanding of the phenomenon of language shift. Well, language shift, language transfer, language replacement, and language assimilation are different terms that are used to refer to the same phenomenon. What is this phenomenon? It is the process whereby a community of speakers of a language shifts to the speaking of a completely different language, usually over an extended period of time. So there are two important things for you to understand with reference to language shift. A, language shift means moving from one language completely to the other language. Leaving this language, moving to the other language. B, what is important for you to understand is this does not happen in one day, that in the morning you would wake up and there would be a shift. No. It is a gradual process that takes place over time. Here I'm going to share with you a technical definition of language shift. It means the process or the event in which a population changes from using one language to the other. As such, recognition of it depends on being able to see the prior and subsequent language as distinct. So the term excludes language change. You need to understand, I hope you already know what is language change, but in relation to the term language shift, you need to understand that language change is something different. Language change means the changes that take place in the grammatical, syntactic, semantic, and morphological structures, etc., of the same language over the times. How does the language evolve or change within itself? Whereas language shift is a completely different process. This means shifting from one language to the other, where the speakers of one language leave one language and shift to or move to the other one. Language shift may be an object of conscious policy. There can be political decisions, state decisions that would make this shift happen. But equally, it may be a phenomenon which is unplanned and often unexplained. Sometimes it becomes difficult even to trace the reasons why there is a shift from language, for example, A to language B. Language shift is a dynamic phenomenon of social change, and therefore it interests sociolinguists to examine or to study it. Well, my dear students, if we look at our lives, stability is a very subjective notion. The concept of stability in itself has its own issues related to it. There are many bilingual situations which do not last for more than 3 generations. This is what sociolinguists have seen, that over 3 generations there would be a linguistic change in every society. However, in some cases, indigenous languages can be swamped by intrusive ones over a relatively shorter time period. There is a possibility that in a particular society or a community or in a group where a language is being used, because of the intrusion, because of the, entry of a forceful kind of impact of another language, the first language, language 1 would, or language A would give, the speakers would give it up, and language B would take its place. If we think of the examples, this has happened to the Aboriginal languages of Australia and the Celtic languages of the British Isles. These are the examples from the history of English language in, history of language in the human community. In other places, immigrant languages have disappeared as their speakers have adopted the language of the new environment to get themselves, settled into the new socio-cultural changes. An example that I would give for that is of South Asian languages like Gujarati and Bengali in Britain. In such cases, what has happened? In such cases of bilingualism, without diglossia, the 2 languages compete for use in the same domain. And of course, when 2 languages are used in a particular domain, for example, in the domain of government, business, law, street, family, friends, etc. When they're competing in different domains, in the competition, either language A or language B would win in each domain, and thus that would become the language of that domain, and there would be a shift to that language. This is how we would define that. So what happens in these bilingual contexts? Speakers are unable to compartmentalize, and in that situation, the shift becomes almost unavoidable. Many attempts to increase the domains of use for a low variety fail, as in Ireland, for example, where there are no widespread knowledge of the classical written variety of the language, and the decreasing use of the spoken language is also taking place. As an example, I would talk about Australia. The decline of non-English languages has been similarly dramatic, and the local tribes, they have shifted from their local languages to English very speedily. Only 4.2% of the Australian-born population regularly uses a language other than English now. Globally, many smaller languages are dying out due to the spread of a few bigger languages, of a few languages such as English, French, and Chinese. And there is a shift globally, if we see, from local or smaller languages to these international languages or to lingua francas. And people are making these shifts to get themselves settled to be a part of the modern sociocultural settlements and systems. Another example is of German and Hungarian in the Austrian village of Oberwart. Villagers who were formerly Hungarian and they were monolinguals have over the past few hundred years become increasingly bilingual, and there's a shift in their language. Oberwart is located near the present-day borders of Austria and Hungary and has been surrounded by German-speaking people for the last 400 years. So, the impact is of German languages very, very strong. And we see a clear shift towards German language. So, to conclude, what I would say is that the process of language shift is something that has been happening over the times through the history, and this has happened to many languages. Sometimes the process is slow, sometimes it is comparatively faster, especially when it comes to a shift to a lingua franca, for example. Most of the times the shift is speedier.